And the mothers kindly agreed to come and share the reading with us. I'd like to turn to Genesis chapter 3. I'll look at the whole chapter, Genesis chapter 3.
Genesis chapter 3. All of it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, As God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that in that day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, Where are you? So he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the fruit of which I commanded you that you should not eat? Then the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And the Lord God said to the woman, What is this that you have done? The woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Then to Adam he said, Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, You shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Also for Adam and his wife the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever, therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life.
I mentioned this morning that I'd like to spend some time this evening looking at Adam. Spending some time looking at to see some of his traits, his relationship with God. We have no difficulties as a church in saying that we believe in creation. We believe that God is the creator of this world. And we believe what the Bible tells us. That man is not an accident, that man is created and man was placed upon the earth. Just to go back into chapter 1 and verse 27, the very first chapter, the Bible tells us, so God created man in his own image. So it's not just the fact that God created man. He gave us some attributes that the animal kingdom do not have. When we see people acting like animals, we can say man is acting like an animal, but it's not natural, is it? We put it up as an exception. Man is not meant to be an animal. He can be an animal, but he's not supposed to be. God has created a difference. It tells us in verse 27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So man is the guardian. Man is the protector of God's creation. Man has dominion and authority. We're not the biggest animal, are we? But God has given, in his wisdom, mankind the dominion. As we look around the world today, how good a job is mankind doing at that? Well, not a very good job at all, is it? This lovely earth that God has created and given to us is being abused left, right and centre. Man is a vegetarian. It tells us quite clearly in verse 29 of chapter 1. God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. That was the food that God provided for us. Man walked with God. Man, Adam, had a relationship with God. He was placed within the Garden of Eden. He had everything that was required. Even now, the word paradise is used to talk about the situation that man found himself in. It tells us something else in chapter 2 of Genesis. It tells us in verse 7 of chapter 2, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. It says what man was made out of. He was made of the dust. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living being. The Bible tells us that God breathed upon Adam. God breathed upon his creation. And the very breath of God was given to man. I mentioned it before, but it's worth thinking. The very first breath that Adam breathed was the very breath of God. His lungs were filled with God's own breath. God breathed. God gave life. God is always a creator. He is always the source of life. There was one rule he gave to Adam. He said, all has been provided for you. Of every tree of the garden you can freely eat. But there's one tree you must not eat. In chapter 2, verse 17, it tells us, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Quite clear, quite plain. It's not complicated. It's not in lawyer speak. It's not in small print. Very clear instruction of what Adam was not to do, and also why he wasn't to do it. It wasn't just the fact, look, don't eat of it. It was saying, don't eat of it, because if you do, you will die. God was very clear of the command, and the command was clearly understood. Because we find, as we turn to chapter 3, the reading that Nita kindly shared with us, at the beginning there, when the serpent is speaking to Eve, he simply asks, as God indeed said. Are you sure that's what God meant? He's sowing the seed of doubt. And as we know, doubt is the opposite of faith. We can have faith and trust in God. And Satan is always seeking to undermine that faith. Even when we found faith, even when we've come to faith, he is still seeking to undermine that faith. Are you sure? Are you sure that's what God meant? Are you sure that's really what it means? Has God indeed said? And Eve recites back to him exactly the command that God had given. We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. She was clearly aware and fully understood the command and what it contained. And then we come to probably one of the most tragic events, if not the most tragic event in the whole history of mankind. And it's there at the very beginning. We don't know how long it was between the command being given and the command being broken. But Eve listened to an alternative. She listened to what the serpent said. And he said, you will not surely die. God had said, touch it, eat of it, you will die. The serpent said, nah, you won't die. You won't die. God knows that in the day of you eat it, you will be like God, you will be like him. You will be able to discern, you will have the understanding between good and evil. God's command isn't there for your benefit, it's there to keep you away from things. You know, the Spirit doesn't change, does it? The devil still tells people that God is the biggest killjoy ever. The world still believes that God is there, preventing them from enjoying life. Not that the commands of God are there so that we can fully appreciate all that life has to offer for us. And Eve stopped and she thought. And she made a choice. Does she stick to the command that God has given? Or does she listen to the alternative? Does she risk everything for the hope of gaining a bit more? What was the motive behind her actions? She saw that it was good for food. She saw it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. Satan appealed to that basic instinct of wanting to be better. Pride, ego, self. She listened to it. She made a choice. She ate of the fruit, and she gave it to her husband. And now Adam has a choice too. He still has a choice to make. He has his own free will here. Yes, Eve has eaten of it, but he doesn't need to. Isn't it so much easier to make wrong decisions with other people who are making wrong decisions? And he also disobeyed the command of God, and he ate of that tree. The Bible makes it very clear that on that day, the whole of creation took a different course. From that day on, every single person who is born in sin. Every single one of us is born outside of God's family. We thank God that some of the songs and the hymns that we've been singing tonight have reminded us Jesus has come and Jesus has died so that this day can be changed. He has come to pay the price for sin. Sin is a word that is not used very often in modern society, but it is still real. It is still alive in the world in which we live. It is rebellion against God. Up until that time, they had lived in innocence. And immediately they became aware that they lacked clothing. So they sowed some fig leaves. And as soon as they heard God walking, As soon as God came to share fellowship with them again, what is their reaction now? Things are different now. Instead of looking forward to meeting him, they shun away from him. Instead of being pleased that he is arriving, they are now fearful of his presence. It tells us quite clearly in verse 8 that Adam and Eve hid themselves. How foolish is that? How can you hide from God? We heard about Jonah, didn't we, trying to fool God. They hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. They no longer were looking for that fellowship and that companionship. You see, sin does that, doesn't it? It makes us conscious that we are not holy. It makes us aware of his holiness and our failings. It makes us reluctant to come to him. It makes us fearful of him. And rightly so. Because in our sin, God is judge. It's changed the dynamics. It's changed the relationship. And so they hide from the presence of God. And in verse 9, we have an incredible statement from God. And you can look at it two ways. It's simply three words. Where are you? God is calling out to Adam. And he's saying, where are you? Are you saying that they were successful, that they'd hidden so well, God didn't know where they were? Of course he knew where they were. He's not asking, where are you physically? He's saying, what have you done? Where are you now? Where are you now in relationship with me? Why do you no longer want to be with me? Why do you no longer joy in my presence? Why are you now hiding from me? And we can echo that cry, can't we? Adam, what have you done? Adam, where are you now? And then Adam replies to God. He simply says this: I heard your voice and I was afraid. He was afraid of God. He feared God. He hid himself from him. He said, we hid from you because we were aware that we were unclothed. And God said, who told you that? How do you know that? Have you eaten from the tree that I told you not to eat from? Isn't it incredible how Adam reacts to that very simple, open question? Have you eaten of the tree that I told you not to? How does Adam now respond after failing? How does Adam now respond after disobeying the commandment of God? Verse 12 tells us, he says, the woman whom you gave to me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. You see, he's not honest, is he? He struggles to take responsibility for his actions. The question was, have you eaten? And the honest answer is, yes, Lord, I have, and I'm sorry. But that's not the answer he gives. And it's not the answer that so often people give, is it? We often blame circumstance. We often blame others for the bad choices that we have made. But ultimately, they're our choices. Nobody can force you to do anything. We choose. But he turns around and he says, well, it really wasn't my fault, God. It was Eve's fault. This is like children in the playground, isn't it? Well, look, it's her fault. And then he almost blames God. He says, the woman whom you gave to me. Almost to say, well, God, if you'd never given me the woman, she would never have got me to eat of the tree. So really, ultimately, it's your fault, isn't it? And doesn't God get the blame so often for our bad mistakes and our bad choices? Hasn't God received the blame down through the centuries for Adam's sin, for Adam's rebellion, for our lack of honesty? So often we blame God for things that God is not responsible for at all. The woman whom you gave to me, she gave me the tree. The Lord then turns to Eve and he asks her, what is this that you have done? Again, personal responsibility. Are you going to take responsibility for your actions? What is this that you have done? And she said, well, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. Again, it's always somebody else's fault. There's always a reason. Don't look to me. It's not my fault. You can't blame me. But the deed's been done. And it can't be changed. And the serpent is cursed to go on his belly for the rest of his life. We know that in verse 15 there is prophecy there about the motive and the spirit that was behind the rebellion in the first place. About Satan being bruised. Satan bruising the heel of Christ and Christ crushing the head of Satan. Even there, in Genesis 3, even there at the very beginning, God is already looking to the solution. Yes, there will be a price. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, God's own Son will have to go to Calvary. But he will defeat this curse. This curse will one day be destroyed. But that is for the future. Adam is left to toil the land. Eve is told that in future childbirth is going to be with great pain. And then they are exiled from the garden. They're banished from God's wonderful provision for them. They have to leave. Because sin always leads to separation between us and God. Always denies us of the joy and the peace of his presence. What we learn about Adam. Well, we learn that he was once comfortable in the presence of God. He was now fearful. We see that he had been once given responsibility and dominion. He is now banished in shame. He was once innocent before God, and he's now a sinner. He's now in rebellion. He's now choosing to disobey and work against him. And yet we thank God that, as I've already mentioned, as dreadful as this day is, as difficult as God knew the plan of salvation would be, he still created Adam in the first place. And don't you find that incredible? That God created Adam knowing that there would come a time when he would disobey God. God knew that by placing Adam on the earth, he would have to send his son one day to die. How much does God love you? How much does God want to share eternity in heaven with you? He could have just had it to himself. But he wants to share it with you. So much so that he was willing even to give of his best, even to send his own son, that we might have these things restored to us, that we might be able to come into the presence of God without fear, knowing that yes, we have been sinners, yes, we have made mistakes, yes, we have failed, and yes, we continue to do so, but the price has been paid. The blood of Christ has been shed. We can know forgiveness for our sin. We can be restored into the family of God. Look at the reversal. Instead of now being banished and outside, Christ has died, and God opens his arms to us and says, come. Come. No longer banished. Now invited back into the family of God. Restored, adopted back into our rightful place. Yes, a sad day, not just for Adam, but a sad day for Adam's race, but not irreversible. And we thank God that the God who sits on the throne had a plan, even to resolve these things.